Spaceballs isn't just one of Mel Brooks's funniest comedies, it's a treasure trove of strange flick facts. Released in 1987, this loving parody took direct aim at Star Wars and the entire sci-fi blockbuster boom. With a cast led by Rick Moranis, John Candy, Bill Pullman, and Daphne Zuniga, it mixed slapstick gags with surprisingly high-quality special effects, so convincing that George Lucas himself gave his blessing, as long as Brooks promised one thing: no merchandise. But what most fans don't know is that the chaos behind the cameras was every bit as outrageous as the comedy on screen. From real burns inside a bubbling cheese costume to John Candy's 40-pound animatronic backpack, from Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise almost starring as Lone Star to desert shoots that nearly fried the crew alive, the making of Spaceballs was stranger than fiction. In the end, Brooks turned lightsabers into Schwartz rings, stormtroopers into bumbling goons, and Darth Vader into a short man with an oversized helmet. But behind the laughs, pratfalls, and pizza gags lies a production just as bizarre as the film itself. So grab your Schwartz ring, comb the desert, and let's jump to ludicrous speed with 25 strange facts about Spaceballs. Fact 1. The movie's merchandise was banned by George Lucas. To get permission from Star Wars creator George Lucas, Mel Brooks agreed to one unusual condition: absolutely no Spaceballs merchandise. Lucas wanted to protect his brand from parody knockoffs. Ironically, this ban inspired one of the movie's funniest gags: yogurt's proud parade of fake products. Lunchboxes, coloring books, and the infamous Spaceballs, the flamethrower. Brooks later joked that the parody made millions laugh, but Lucas still made all the real money. Fact 2. Pizza the Hut caused real burns. Dom DeLuise may have voiced Pizza the Hut, but the actor inside the molten cheese suit, Richard Caron, paid the price. To get that gooey, bubbling effect, the crew poured hot artificial cheese over the costume. The heat caused second and even third degree burns on Caron's body. He left the shoot and had to be replaced. In the end, Pizza the Hut was more nightmare fuel than comic relief for the people behind the mask.
No, please, leave me alone. No, you are mine. Not so fast, Helmet.
Fact 3. Rick Moranis improvised Dark Helmet's funniest scene. Dark Helmet's most iconic moment, playing with his dolls, was never in the script. Rick Moranis came up with the scene on the spot, including the ridiculous "I'm a princess" line. Moranis also created the character's split personality, a menacing Vader-like voice when the helmet was down, and his normal nerdy voice when it was up. That small touch made Dark Helmet one of the most memorable parodies in comedy history.
Wise guys, you mean? What do they know? Here, let me take a look.
Fact 4. Mel Brooks was allergic to yogurt. When Mel Brooks donned the gold latex makeup to play Yogurt, it caused a severe allergic reaction. He broke out in a rash that spread dangerously close to his eyes, forcing makeup artists to limit application to 1 hour a day. On top of that, Brooks had to shuffle around on his knees to appear small, even with padding. By the end of filming, Brooks admitted Yogurt may have been his funniest role, but it was also his most painful. Fact 5. Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise said no to Lone Star. Before Bill Pullman became Lone Star, the part was offered to two Hollywood heavyweights, Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise. Both turned it down. Brooks eventually cast Pullman, who was still a newcomer at the time. He later said that because Brooks already had stars like John Candy and Rick Moranis on board, he could take a risk on a fresh face. That gamble paid off. Lone Star became Pullman's breakout role. Fact 6. Filmed on the same stage as The Wizard of Oz. Much of Spaceballs was shot on MGM's historic Stage 27, the very stage where The Wizard of Oz was filmed nearly 50 years earlier. Crew members even spotted leftover yellow bricks from the Yellow Brick Road. Brooks, ever the satirist, loved the irony that the home of Dorothy and Toto also hosted Barf, Dark Helmet, and Pizza the Hut. Fact 7. Sunglasses to protect against green screens. In the 1980s, green screen technology was still new, and rumors spread that the bright green light might damage eyesight. Out of caution, cast members like Bill Pullman wore sunglasses between takes. While the fears turned out to be nonsense, the sight of actors walking around the set in full costume and Ray-Bans added another layer of absurdity to an already strange production. Fact 8. Dot Matrix was played by a mime. Joan Rivers lent her voice to Dot Matrix, but inside the bulky golden robot suit was Lorene Yarnell, a famous mime from the duo Shields and Yarnell. Her background in mime gave Dot's jerky robotic movements a polished, comedic realism that animatronics alone couldn't achieve. Brooks later said Rivers and Yarnell were the perfect team. One supplied the voice, the other the soul. Fact 9. The Millennium Falcon makes a cameo. During an exterior shot of the Space Diner, eagle-eyed fans can spot the Millennium Falcon parked casually in the lot. It's a sly Easter egg, a wink from Brooks to Lucas. Lucas not only allowed the cameo, but reportedly laughed at it, telling Brooks, "You can spoof my movies all you want, just don't sell toys." Fact 10. George Lucas's team helped with effects. One of the strangest twists in Spaceballs production is that George Lucas himself indirectly contributed to the film. After agreeing to let Mel Brooks spoof Star Wars under the condition of no merchandise, Lucas offered the use of his company, Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, to handle the space sequences. ILM's cutting-edge miniatures and optical effects gave the parody the same visual polish as the films it was mocking. Brooks later admitted that the irony wasn't lost on him. The man he was lampooning actually helped make his parody look incredible. That's just the first 10, from dangerous cheese burns to hidden Millennium Falcon cameos. But believe it or not, things get even stranger. Stick around for facts 11 through 25, where we'll cover hidden cameos, lawsuits, last-minute rewrites, and the surprising legacy of this sci-fi spoof that refused to play it straight. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. Fact 11. Bill Pullman was the third choice for Lone Star. Bill Pullman wasn't Mel Brooks' first pick for the swashbuckling Lone Star. Before him, Brooks offered the role to Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks, two of Hollywood's hottest rising stars in the mid-'80s. Both turned it down, leaving Brooks to cast the then-unknown Pullman at a price the budget could handle. Pullman later admitted he was nervous, stepping into a cast already stacked with big comedic names like John Candy and Rick Moranis, but the gamble launched his career. Fact 12. The most expensive film of Mel Brooks' career. Although Spaceballs was a parody, Brooks insisted on treating it with blockbuster-level production value. He brought in George Lucas's own company, Industrial Light and Magic, to create the special effects. This level of polish didn't come cheap, making Spaceballs the most expensive movie Brooks ever produced. Ironically, the high cost was necessary to make the parody convincing, because the better the effects looked, the funnier the send-up of Star Wars became. Fact 13. The original title, Planet Moron. When a studio executive casually asked Mel Brooks what he was working on, Brooks blurted out the phrase Planet Moron as a joke. For a while, that was the actual working title of the project, but Brooks had to abandon it after realizing the British sci-fi spoof Morons from Outer Space had already hit theaters. The change to Spaceballs gave the film a sharper edge, equal parts space, adventure, and screwball comedy. Fact 14. John Candy's animatronic ears were a nuisance. Playing Barf the Mog was no easy task for John Candy. He wore a 40-pound battery pack to power his wagging tail and expressive animatronic ears. Special effects artist Rick Lazzarini loved showing off the ear movements, until Mel Brooks told him to dial it back. Brooks thought the twitching ears were stealing focus from the actor's performances. For Candy, the heavy gear was just part of the price of being half dog, half man, and his own best friend. Fact 15. Michael Winslow saved the production money. Best known from Police Academy, Michael Winslow brought his unique vocal talents to Spaceballs. In his role as a radar technician, he created all the bleeps, sweeps, and creeps entirely with his voice. His realistic sound effects were so convincing, they eliminated the need for costly post-production work, saving the studio about $1,000. Brooks later said Winslow was the rare actor who came with his own built-in sound department. Fact 16. The desert scene was brutal to film. The sweeping desert sequence was filmed in Yuma, Arizona, under blistering summer conditions. Cast and crew battled triple-digit heat, and the sand dunes proved nearly impossible for equipment like cameras and lights. Bill Pullman recalled that the gear constantly overheated and broke down, slowing production. For the actors, marching across the endless dunes while Brooks shouted, "Comb the desert," wasn't just funny, it was exhausting. Fact 17. Dark Helmet's look was Moranis' idea. the original design for Dark Helmet was even more absurd than what made it to screen. Concept art showed a ridiculously oversized, cartoonish helmet. Rick Moranis himself suggested toning it down to a distorted version of Darth Vader's mask, still comically large, but recognizable as a parody. That adjustment gave the character just enough menace to balance with the slapstick, making Dark Helmet one of Moranis' most beloved roles. Fact 18. Daphne Zuniga was skeptical at first. Princess Vespa actress Daphne Zuniga wasn't initially a fan of Mel Brooks' comedies. She thought his style was too crass and didn't see herself fitting into the parody world. But after meeting Brooks and reading the script, she changed her mind. Zuniga even insisted on singing her own version of "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen" in the movie, a decision that added sincerity to an otherwise outrageous space comedy. Fact 19. Max Brooks inspired Spaceballs. The spark for Spaceballs came from Mel Brooks' son, Max. As a boy, Max was obsessed with Star Wars and begged his father to take him to the films repeatedly. Seeing the galaxy far, far away through his son's eyes, Brooks realized there was room for a parody that both mocked and celebrated the genre. Decades later, Max Brooks would become a writer in his own right, best known for the novel World War Z. Fact 20. John Hurt's chest-burster cameo was a surprise. One of the film's biggest laughs comes from the diner scene, when John Hurt plays a man who suddenly has an alien burst out of his chest, a direct parody of his role in Alien, 1979. What most fans don't know is that Brooks kept the gag a secret from much of the cast. Hurt, reprising his role, ad-libbed the line, "Oh no, not again," to make the parody self-aware. Even the puppet chestburster wearing a top hat and singing "Hello, My Baby" was staged to mimic Looney Tunes cartoons. This scene became a cult moment, often cited as one of the funniest crossovers in parody history. Fact 21. Budget, box office, and return on investment. Spaceballs cost around $22.7 million to make. It went on to gross roughly $38.1 million domestically, which was essentially the total worldwide box office since it had little release outside the US. That means the film made back about 1.7 times its production budget. Not a runaway blockbuster, but solid enough, especially given its status today as a cult favorite. Fact 22. Rotten Tomatoes score and critical reception. Despite its enduring popularity, Spaceballs received a lukewarm critical reception at launch. On Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a 52% fresh rating from critics, with an average rating of about 5.9 out of 10. The site's consensus calls it, "There's fine spoofery and amusing characters in Spaceballs, though it's a far cry from Mel Brooks' peak era." On Metacritic, the film has a score of 46 out of 100, signaling mixed or average reviews. Audiences, however, gave it more love. CinemaScore's polling rated it a B- average. Over time, the film's comedic moments, quotability, and fan enthusiasm helped it transcend its middling initial critical reception. Fact 23. The sequel, Spaceballs 2, 2027. Who's coming back? Who's new? After years of talk, a sequel is officially on the way. Spaceballs 2 is slated for 2027. Production is underway, and a table read photo has already made the rounds. Here's who's returning. Rick Moranis will reprise Dark Helmet, making his return to live action after a 28-year hiatus. Bill Pullman is back as Lone Star. Daphne Zuniga returns as Princess Vespa. Mel Brooks resumes roles as Yogurt, and presumably President Scroob, and is also co-writing producing. New cast members include Lewis Pullman, Bill Pullman's real-life son, Keke Palmer, Josh Gad, and Anthony Carrigan in fresh roles. The film is being directed by Josh Greenbaum, with writing credits to Gad, Brooks, Benji Sammet, and Dan Hernandez. Brooks has cheekily described the sequel as a non-prequel, non-reboot sequel Part 2, but with robot elements franchise expansion film. Fact 24. Who made the most money? Cast and legacy earnings. While no public breakdown shows exactly who earned the most on Spaceballs, one intriguing legacy is how its jokes and scenes have generated indirect financial gains. For example, Elon Musk credited the film with inspiring Tesla's mode names, Ludicrous Mode, Plaid Mode, and even the idea for a real-world flamethrower, a nod to the film's gag product line. Those cultural references have kept Spaceballs in public conversation. Meanwhile, cast members like Moranis and Brooks have gained enduring royalties from home media, syndication, streaming, and merchandise licensing where allowed, Blu-ray, digital. If we consider who made the biggest long-term profit, it's arguable that Mel Brooks, as creator, producer, co-writer, performer, and brand anchor, has made the most across all revenue streams. Fact 25. The film's cult legacy and Tesla's tribute. One of the quirkiest byproducts of Spaceballs is how a sci-fi parody helped shape real-world tech marketing. Tesla adopted the film's speed nomenclature, light speed, ridiculous speed, ludicrous, and plaid, with plaid overtaking ludicrous as its highest mode. The homage is so explicit, many Tesla enthusiasts refer to modes in full Spaceballs style. That cultural impact, decades after release, reveals how a spoof movie, branded as just a silly joke, really took root in pop culture and tech lore. Bonus fact: the animated series spin-off. In 2008, Spaceballs, the animated series, aired on G4 in the US and Super Channel in Canada. It ran for one season of 13 episodes and continued the parody universe, albeit with lower budget animation and mixed reception. Still, it's a curious footnote in the Spaceballs saga. The film's world was fertile enough to spawn its own cartoon world. From blistering cheese suits and twitching robotic ears to box office returns, tech inspirations, and a sequel decades in the making, Spaceballs has more than earned its place in cinematic oddities. What began as a parody of Star Wars and sci-fi tropes became a cult classic with a life far beyond its opening weekend. As we wait for Spaceballs 2 in 2027, with Rick Moranis back in action, Brooks in the mix, old faces returning and new ones joining, we'll see how this strange little flick continues to warp through pop culture. In the meantime, may the Schwartz be with you, in all speeds. Light, ridiculous, ludicrous, and yes, plaid. This is Strange Flick Facts, where we dig up the bizarre truths behind the movies you thought you knew.